What are the consequences for showing favoritism to one child over another? Has jealousy or envy entered your heart when dealing with your siblings? These are tough topics to deal with, and today we will see some of them through the eyes of Joseph. These are the issues of love. Welcome to another edition of Sunday School with the Deek. I am Deacon Wallace Hill IV, proud member of the Mount Pisgah Missionary Baptist Church, where my father, the Honorable Wallace Hill III, is the pastor. I am so happy to be coming into your living rooms, into your cell phones and your computers and your televisions and tablets once again. And thank you for tuning in each and every week as we break down the Sunday school lessons based on the International Lesson Series. For those of you that are new to this station, do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button at the bottom of the screen and then hit that little bell next to it, and each week you'll get notified. Ding, ding, ding. The Deek has uploaded another lesson. I'm so excited today because this week we get to start our new quarter. This is our fall quarter that runs from September to November. And the quarter is called Love for One Another. And so for the first 5 weeks, we're going to be in the book of Genesis, dealing with the struggles of love. That's what our unit for the first 5 weeks is called, Struggles of Love. And so our first lesson is a doozy. We jump right into dealing with the issues of love. And it seems like we all have so many issues around love. How we love, when we love, who we love. And when in the grand scheme of things, there should be no limitations on love. If this country needs anything right now, it's love. The problem is there seems to be so many issues behind love, and that's the reason why our lesson is going to bring out these things today. Parental favoritism, sibling rivalries, and jealousies. You know, they're all part of our lesson today. And for those of you that are only children or only child, you probably don't understand. But for those of you who have brothers and sisters or stepbrothers and sisters, you'll totally relate to today's lesson. Jealousies can have a tendency to run deep when children share parents or share one parent, if not both. God never intended for kids to be a product of multiple parents, but it's a reality and something that we have to deal with. And this is in no way, shape, or form a slam to mothers or fathers that have children with multiple people. There's a variety of reasons why these things happen, and some of them are out of our control, right? But the reality is we have to deal with it, and we got to deal with the fallout from it. Or at least try to, and then try to minimize it. Parents can play a big role in how kids are affected by living in the same house with kids of multiple parents. I'm trying to give you a quick synopsis of the events that happened prior to chapter 37. And you'll need this in order to get caught up to where we start. So let's go ahead and get into it. It's going to be a good one, y'all. Abraham had a son named Isaac. Isaac had a son named Jacob. Now, Jacob was a trickster. You know, he tried to steal his twin brother's birthright as he exited the womb, and he carried that same attitude on through the rest of his life. When Jacob was in his mother's womb with his twin brother, he tried to grab his brother's heel as his brother was exiting the womb in order to try to be the first one born. From the time they were born until the time Jacob fled and left his parents' house, Jacob continually tried to steal his brother's birthright. Because in those days, the oldest son received most of the inheritance. So Jacob tricked his father Isaac in his old years when he couldn't see. He was acting like his brother and tricked his dad into giving him the birthright. Once the oldest brother Esau found out, Jacob had to flee and run from the danger that was there. His mom sent him to her brother's house. Now Jacob was his mom's favorite, and Esau was his dad's favorite. So, some things are generational where you show favoritism. We'll get into that later. So Jacob fled to his uncle's house. His uncle's name was Laban. This was his mom's brother. And he stayed there and worked for his uncle. He fell in love with this girl named Rachel. He loved Rachel. But you know how what goes around comes around? Well, Laban was a trickster too. And he kept promising Jacob he could have his daughter Rachel if he worked for him for 7 years. So after 7 years, he went to marry Rachel and came to find out that he was tricked into marrying Laban's other daughter, who was not so pretty. Her name was Leah. The Bible called her tender-eyed. That's just nice Bible speak for she was ugly. Once he got over being tricked, he agreed to work for his uncle another 7 years in order to marry Rachel. Now, man, 14 years to marry a woman, you got to be in love with her. So after 7 more years of working and having 4 kids with Leah, so she must have not been that tender-eyed. Anyway, he finally able to marry the love of his life, Rachel. Not to mention that he had kids with Leah's handmaid, because after a while Leah stopped being able to have kids. So once he married Rachel, Rachel was not able to have kids. So in order to make him feel better, make her feel better, she told him to have kids with her handmaiden. So if you keep a score at home, Jacob ended up having 13 kids. 7 with tender-eyed Leah. She must not have been too tender-eyed. 2 with Leah's servant. 2 with Rachel, the love of his life. And 2 with Rachel's servant. Now, the 2 with Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. So, as you can see, Jacob got some problems on his hands. 13 kids with 4 baby mamas will bring out all kinds of baby mama drama. So let's get into the lesson. It starts, we're in chapter 37. We're going to start with verse 2. Ready? Here we go. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. So these are the generations of Jacob is how it starts. And usually when you see the words like this in the Bible, you think you're going to get a list of kids that person had. But here you don't see that. So instead of these generations, these are the generations of Jacob, it probably makes more sense to say that these are the things that happened to Jacob once he had all them kids. Seriously. But that is the gist of kind of what they're saying here. Well, maybe I'll say it a little better. It should say something like, these are the events that befell Joseph. Jacob. Oh. The book of Genesis is about to transition from Jacob to Joseph here in the 37th chapter. Did you know 25% of the book of Genesis is dedicated to Joseph? That's a lot. So, after it says these are the generations of Jacob, it goes right into talking about his favorite son, Joseph. And it picks up on a specific event Joseph was 17 years old, feeding the flocks with his half-brothers, or most likely watching them feed flocks. I'll get more into that a little bit later. But notice that his dad only had him working with the children of his wives' handmaids, Bilhah and Zilpah. And if you're sitting and watching this, then like I said, you need to get some paper to write this stuff down because it's hard to keep up with. And so, or if you're jogging or if you're doing yard work, Reggie, or doing something else as you watch and listen to this today, pay close attention. Jacob has 7 kids with Leah, the tender-eyed woman who he got tricked into marrying. He has 2 kids with tender-eyed Leah's servant, Zilpah. He has 2 kids with the love of his life, Rachel. And he has 2 kids with the love of his life's servant, Bilhah. So he has kids with Rachel's handmaids because Rachel was barren and couldn't have kids at first. And it was a custom back then that if you couldn't give kids to your husband, then you would let him have children with the handmaid. And this is what Sarah did with Abraham earlier in the book of Genesis. The problem with Sarah is God had told her she was going to have kids, and she still did it anyway. So that's where she went wrong. Okay, everybody caught up? All right, let's get back to the lesson. Jacob has his son working with his half-brothers that are by his wife's servants for a reason. These kids are probably just happy to be in the family. They didn't feel as entitled as the kids from the wives. But all the same, you'll see they still have some issues too. So let's look at the rest of the verse. Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Joseph had to go tell his dad all the evil things that his half-brothers was doing. And we know nothing about the specifics of what they were doing. But this is why Joseph was there. Joseph is a kid full of integrity. And trust me, Jacob knows his other children too. That's why he had Joseph watching them. We don't know if Joseph had accused his brothers of, doing a bad job of shepherding or, wasting money, going into towns, buying women and dealing with women or whatever. But if Joseph had observed some real malfeasance on their part, he was bound to tell his dad what happened. So, trust me when I say parents know their kids. Parents occasionally get surprised by their kids, but for the most part, they know their kids. Let's go to verse 3. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a coat of many colors. Now, we find out why Joseph is having so many issues with his half-brothers. His father, Jacob, loved Joseph more than all the children. Jacob and Israel, okay, what you'll notice here is that in the first verse, they called him Jacob. Now in verse 2, they called him Jacob. Now in verse 3, they call him Israel. So his Jacob and Israel are 2 names for the same person, okay? And they're used interchangeably here in this story. But Jacob was the name given to him at his birth in chapter 25, verse 26. And it means grasp the heel. Jacob was Esau's twin, and he was born second. But Jacob came out of the womb grasping Esau's heel. So God gave him the name. So now God gives him the name Israel after Jacob wrestled with God at a place called Peniel. God said, your name will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have fought with God and with men and have prevailed. So that's where we get the 12 tribes of Israel, because Israel had 13 kids. But one of them was a girl. Her name was Dinah. So Jacob loved Joseph more than all the children. Getting back to the lesson. And just like I said, parents know their kids. Kids know when their parents, just like parents know their kids, kids know their parents when they show favoritism to other kids, over to other kids. And usually it's in a low-key, kind of subtle kind of way, but Jacob just out there with his. It says he loved Joseph more than all his other children because he was born in his old age. Plus, it was with the wife that he loved so much. So Jacob was said to be like 91 years old when Joseph was born. So now he's 108 when this goes down. He worked 14 years for Rachel. And then when he got her, she couldn't have kids. So then when God blessed her and opened up her womb, Joseph was special to Jacob. So he gives Joseph a beautiful gift, a coat of many colors. Now, the ancient Hebrew phrase for this is a tunic of many colors. And a tunic was something that would extend all the way down to your wrist and all the way down to your ankles, as opposed to a shorter one. And this was not like something that people that worked wore. So it was a garment of privilege. It was a garment of status, like a king. And the man that wore a tunic of many colors watched others as they did hard physical work. And that's why I said in verse 2, I'm sure Joseph was just watching his brothers feed the flock. Joseph wasn't feeding no flocks. So obviously this didn't sit well with the other children, right? So jealousy is going sure to overcome these kids. Think about how you feel if your parents blatantly favored you over, or your siblings over you. And he was the only one that didn't have to work. Man. Anyway, let's go to verse 4. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his children, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. I told you. It's only natural that kids react this way. When they saw that their dad loved Joseph more than all of them, it says they hated him. They didn't just inwardly hate him. It said they hated him so much they couldn't speak a kind word to this dude. They couldn't even fake it. I failed to mention another thing that the brothers witnessed. Back when Jacob finally went back home after working all those decades for his uncle, he finally went back home, and he was kind of fearful that his brother was still probably going to be a little upset and try to kill him. So as he approached the city, he saw his brother Esau heading towards him with 400 men. So Joseph put his handmaids Bilhah and Zilpah and their children in the front of the line. Then Leah and her kids next. Then Rachel and Joseph last. So you can find that in the 33rd chapter of Genesis. He lined them up according to who was most expendable to him. And you wonder why these kids hate Joseph so much. Anyway, go to verse 5. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. So it says, and Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told his brethren. And when you see dreamed a dream in the Bible, usually it refers to a dream being prophetic, meaning something that's true, that's going to happen down the line. And a lot of you have heard the story before, and a lot of you may feel like Joseph should have just kept this dream to himself. But you got to remember, Joseph was only 17 years old, and he had no clue what his dream meant. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So Joseph had a dream like many of us do. And Joseph did like many of us do when we have a weird dream. We tell people about it, right? You know, well, some people keep their dreams to themselves so nobody else go play their number in the lottery. Remember those dream books? When I was a kid, I hear people who knew what every dream played for. What every dream played for. As a matter of fact, Fred Sanford, I love Fred Sanford. I was Sanford's son. He had bad too playing the numbers. Oh man. Anyway, let's get back to the lesson. Joseph told his dream to his 11 brothers. And the word says they hated him even more. Why would a dream make them hate him even more? Because they were at a point where if Joseph sneezed, they hated him. They hated him more. Joseph was in a bad spot, y'all. Verse 6. And he said unto them, hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. So, whether they want to hear the dream or not, he was bound and determined to tell them what the dream was. And the dream probably puzzled him, Joseph, and he wanted some input. I mean, I can understand that. We all been in that position where you tell anybody who will listen. You say, man, I had this crazy dream last night. And then immediately you start telling them what the dream was. So whether they want to hear it or not, right? So let's go to verse 7. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field. And lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood around about and made obeisance to my sheaf. Joseph jumps right into this dream. He says, behold, we were binding sheaves. We were binding sheaves in the field. He says, we, so the brothers know that they are in the dream too. They are all in the field binding sheaves, which means it's harvest time. Binding sheaves of corn simply means they're tying them up in bundles to be carried home. And lo, my sheaf arose and stood upright. It seemed to Joseph that, after he had bound one of his sheaves on the ground, that it rose up itself and stood erect. Now look what happens next. And behold, your sheaves stood around about and made obeisance to my sheaf. So if you keep a score at home, let me break this down to you. Joseph and his brothers are binding sheaves of corn. One of Joseph's sheaves stands upright. Then each of his 11 brothers' sheaves stands upright as well, but bows down to Joseph's sheaves. Whew. Why would Joseph tell him this dream? Let's go to verse 8. Then his brethren said to him, shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And his brethren said to him, at least they waited till the dream was finished before they started talking to him. They said, shall you indeed reign over us? Now, they highly offended by this dream and for him telling them the dream, for that matter. So they seem to have understood the dream better than Joseph did. They understood it to mean that Joseph would have dominion over them or power over them to the point where they would have to bow down in his presence. And for that simple fact, he told the dream, they probably think Joseph believed it kind of too. And because of this, the Bible said they hated him even more because of his dreams and because of his words. Now, I'm not sure how much more you can hate somebody when you already hate them. I mean, is there levels of hate? Seriously, in verse 5 it says they hated him more. Now here in verse 8 it says they hated him more. Let's just face it, y'all. When you don't like somebody, it doesn't matter what they do. You're going to not like them even more. Whether they do something good or whether they do something bad, your dislike for them stirs up something in you that at the sight of them, it just starts to work your nerves on the inside. And I'm a living witness that you can get past some of this hatred in your heart if you truly focus on God and not the person that you're trying to direct your hatred towards. But we could talk about that another time. Let's move on. Verse 9. And he dreamed yet another dream and told his brethren and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. Here we go. A short while later, Joseph has another dream. And here is where he makes his mistakes. He told his brothers again. And if you know anything about Joseph, you know he turned out to be a great man. But this is one of the areas where Joseph seemed to make a mistake. He tells his brothers again his dream, even though how they reacted the first time. He says, behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. Either he didn't fully know how much they resented him the first time when he told them his dream, or maybe he just was trying to clear himself from feigning these dreams. Ding, ding, ding. Word of the day is feign. F-E-I-G-N. To feign is to invent or to pretend about something. Invent something or pretend about something. So maybe, just maybe, Joseph was trying to prove to his brothers that he was not making this stuff up by sharing the dreams with them. or maybe Joseph was so caught up in his dreams and what they meant to him personally that he couldn't even see how it meant to other people or what it meant to other people. So even though these dreams did come true, some stuff you ought to just keep to yourself. Everybody is not happy with your blessings. You may receive a wonderful message from God, but maybe he don't intend for you to tell it to everybody. And see, Joseph showed a lack of wisdom here. And maybe it was rooted in pride. But this dream had the same theory behind it as the first dream. But this time, in addition to the 11 brothers represented by the 11 stars, he said the sun and the moon bowed down to him as well. So the sun and the moon here represent his mom and dad, his dad and mom. Wow. Let's go to the next verse, verse 10. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamt? Shall I and thy mother and thy brother indeed come bow down ourselves to thee on the earth? So verse 10 says, and he told his father and to his brethren. So Joseph brings his father Jacob, or Israel, into it in order to pass judgment on the dream. I think he's trying to get some insight on the dream, or at least try to make some sense of it. So he tells his dream to his father in the presence of his brothers again. Now he already told it to his brothers. Now he's telling it to his father in the presence of his brothers. Whether it was at the dinner table or they was all sitting around the deck after a long day of harvesting corn, I don't know. Regardless, he tells the dream again in all of their presence. And his father immediately rebukes him. Now, Jacob, or Israel, he operated in good wisdom here, as good fathers would do. Jacob wasn't necessarily rebuking him for what the dream was about, because we can't help what we dream about. But Jacob needed to put Joseph in check in front of his brothers. He needed Joseph not to become prideful or haughty or stuck up because of his dreams. He needed him not to become insolent. Ding, ding, ding. Double word of the day. Insolent. I-N-S-O-L-E-N-T. Insolent. Insolent means to show a rude or arrogant lack of respect for others. So Jacob didn't want Joseph to become this type of person to him or his brothers. So look what he says to him. He says, what is this dream that thou hast dreamt? Shall I and your mother and thy brethren indeed come down and bow down ourselves to thee on the earth? Now at this point, Jacob even sounds a little offended. He couldn't understand how Joseph could be exalted higher than his own father and mother. Now, for you Bible scholars out there, this portion of Genesis probably isn't in strict chronological order. Back in Genesis 35, verses 16 through 20, Joseph's mother Rachel died. And so this portion of Genesis seems to backtrack somewhat. And this is probably what was meant in the second verse where it says, this is the genealogy of Jacob. This was most likely a transition point in the book. Verse 2 is like the end of Jacob's record. And then it transitions into Joseph's records of events. Anyway, I threw that in for free in case anyone out there who may be reading the preceding chapters and knew that Rachel was dead already. And asked the question, how did mama go bow down to him when the mama dead? Well, now he did still have a stepmother, Leah, who was still alive. So, Jacob understood the son to be him, who was the head of the family. And since Leah was still around, it could be that she was represented by the moon, which is the lesser of the two, but still, the moon contributes a great deal. And so the 11 stars represented his brothers, who were the stars that received their light from the sun. Let's go to verse 11. And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. So we're not surprised that his brothers were jealous, but we are a little surprised that privately Jacob was wondering what all of this meant. He didn't let it on in front of the kids, but deep in his heart, he was wondering what all of this meant. It kind of reminds me of Mary when she pondered on some things, when she saw Jesus did some things, like when he was left at the temple, and they went back to get him as a child, and he said, I got to be about my Father's business. You know, Mary, the Bible says she pondered those things. So anyway, our lesson skips verses 12 through 22 and picks up in verse 23. Now, a lot happens between 12 and 22, and I'll try to summarize it for you. Or you can stop the recording and read it for yourself. If you do read it for yourself, let me know how I do in my summary, okay? So, all the brothers except for Joseph, who was still young, were out pasturing the sheep at a place called Shechem, which is about 60 miles from their home in Hebron. And after some time of them being away, Jacob decides to send Joseph to look for them and check on them and bring him back a report about how the kids were doing. So when Joseph got to Shechem, they weren't there. But he ran into a man and asked him, have you seen my brothers? And the man said, yeah, and told him he had overheard them saying they were leaving Shechem and going to a place called Dothan, which is about 4 miles from Shechem. So Joseph went to Dothan and found his brothers. And when his brothers saw him coming from a distance, they started saying things like, oh, here come the dreamer, you know, and probably a bunch of other stuff that the kids say when their parents not around or that they couldn't put in the Bible. This reminds me of the prodigal son when the dad saw them approaching the house. These brothers saw Joseph coming from a while away because he had this coat on. And you know, every time they saw this coat, it just stirred up all kinds of emotions. They were planning to kill him and throw him in a pit or a well, or your Bible might call it a cistern. Now, you know, you got to have a lot of hate in your heart to plot to kill your brother. That's why I mentioned earlier that as parents, we need to make sure we're not showing favoritism or sowing seeds of hatred or jealousy in our kids by showing favoritism. Their plan was to kill him and throw him into a well or pit, and then tell their dad that a wild animal had eaten them. But Reuben, who was the oldest child, he was the first child born, it's not a sandwich, y'all. Come on. Even though I could go for a nice turkey Reuben right now, I'm hungry. Anyway, Reuben was the oldest and had a little clout, right? So he says, let's not shed his blood. Let's just throw him in the pit and he'll eventually die because he'll have no water. But the Bible says Reuben secretly planned to go back and rescue him. And this is where our lesson picks back up on verse 23. So let's go to 23. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. See, I told you. To me, this was another mistake by Joseph. Why you rocking your coat of many colors as you strolling through the wilderness? You asking for trouble. There was no coat like this anywhere, and it screamed, look at me, look at me. I'm sure Joseph loved his coat, I get it. And he was proud of it, and it made him feel like he was special, but it brought too much attention. And this is how they knew it was him coming. When he got there, they stripped him of his coat. Let's go to verse 24. And they took him and cast him into a pit. And the pit was empty. There was no water in it. So they carried out their plan. They threw him into the pit. And you know, these brothers was cold. These brothers were cold. I know Joseph had to be wondering, what the heck is happening to me? So our lesson skips verses 25, 26, and 27. And it picks up on the last verse, which is 28. I'll read 25, 26, and 27 from the New Living Translation. Verse 25. Then, just as they were sitting down to eat, so y'all threw y'all brother in a pit, and y'all so comfortable that y'all can go down and sit down and have a meal. Man. Anyway, As they were sitting down to eat, they looked up and saw a caravan of camels in the distance coming toward them. It was a group of Ishmaelite traders taking a load of gum, balm, and aromatic resin from Gilead to Egypt. Now, Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain by killing our brother? We'd have to cover up the crime." Now, Judah is one of the 12 or 11 kids. He says, what we gain by killing him? Why would we need to shed his blood? But then we'd have to cover up the crime. So instead of hurting him, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites traders. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. And the brothers agreed. Oh, that's so nice. They got feelings. They're not going to kill their brother. They're just going to sell him. Oh, God. Our last verse of the day is verse 28. Let's get it. Verse 28. Then there passed by Midianite merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. So they put their plan into action, y'all. As the Midianite traders approached, they pulled Joseph out of the pit. Joseph probably felt relieved that he was being pulled out of the pit. Probably thought, maybe they were just playing a little practical joke on their little brother. Well, that relief didn't last too long, because as soon as Joseph was able to knock the dust off himself, brush his little shoulders off, he was being sold for 20 pieces of silver. These brothers probably laughed as the Ishmaelites went their way on to Egypt, feeling good that they didn't kill Joseph and that they made a little money in the process. Best of all, they don't have to deal with this dream no more, because they thought they got rid of Joseph, then the dream was killed as well. And see, what these brothers don't realize is that God always has the last say. You can't try to manipulate a situation or circumstances, to go the way you want, because God has the last say. And see, we don't realize how much of a role jealousy plays in our lives. We may not be as bad as these brothers were. We may not put our jealousy into action, but it still affects us. And we need to try to guard against jealousy as Christians, y'all, especially with family members. If you see your cousin or your brother or sister or aunt, doing fun stuff on Facebook, sitting on the island, sipping on a drink with an umbrella in it, or on the Caribbean, and you're at home freezing, ain't never been on vacation, you can't be jealous. You got to be happy for them, because God loves all of us, and he supplies all of us with our needs, and each of us has what is for us, and we just got to accept that. We need to realize, if you look in your book, like your book says, that the most precious gift in the world was Jesus Christ, and that gift is available to anybody. So as Christians, we should be happy for all our brothers and sisters in Christ. Don't look at life through your eyes, but look at them through the eyes of Christ. And when you think about it, Joseph was a type of Christ. Think about some of the things. Both were shepherds. Both are the most loved by their fathers. Both Joseph and Jesus, brothers, was jealous of them and didn't believe them. The prophecies that Joseph would rule his brothers, the tribes of Israel, and Jesus would rule the whole world, including Israel. Both were stripped of their coats. Both were sold by one of the 12 named Judah. The Greek name for Judah is Judas. Both were falsely accused. Both were falsely punished. The list goes on and on. They pulled him out of the pit, right? Jesus was lifted up out of his grave. So, a lot of things were very similar. They said there was like 101 similarities to Joseph and Jesus. Anyway, back to the lesson. Parents, please understand that we have to walk a very tight rope with blended families. Be cognizant of how your actions are looked at. Even in non-blended families, our actions can be, devastating if we favor one child over the other. And lastly, to the children, love your brothers and sisters. We all come from the same womb, right? So we have a bond. We need each other more than you even realize. So don't let jealousy win. Let love win. All right, so next week we continue in this quarter on love. We'll still be in Genesis, dealing with more encounters that Joseph has to deal with. We'll be in chapter 41, verses 25 through 33, verses 37 through 40, and verses 50 through 52. Wow, that's 16 verses, y'all. Man, the Deek gonna have to figure out a way to cut this stuff short. The lesson for next week is called God Rewards Obedience. And that should be fun. This is gonna be a good quarter, y'all. So here is another lesson. And as we say every week, may the Lord watch between me and thee while we're absent one from another. Amen. Sunday School with the Deek.